Hey guys, what's going on? This is Xenox Gamer here, and just before we get into the topic of this video, I have been having a lot of issue with law recorders, so the gameplay in this isn't really the best video that I wanted in terms of representation for what I want to talk about, but nonetheless it is pretty decent gameplay. So today what I want to talk about is pressure. A very general topic, but at the same time it's something that I feel a lot of players kind of disregard and don't really think about too often. And I want to go in depth with this, so I want to talk about each lane as well, so it's going to be a little bit longer of a video that way. So we start off with top lane, and very generally how pressure is applied for both blue and purple side. Alright, so starting off with the top lane. Now there's a few different ways you can apply pressure, but mainly what I want to talk about, which is a little bit different as well, is what happens when, let's say if you die top lane and where pressure is applied and that sort of thing everywhere else on the map. This just doesn't just apply to your lane. I want to talk about the overall map and the entire objective. So in top lane, if you're blue side or something like that, we'll start blue and then we'll work our way to purple as well, just because there are different benefits depending on the side you are on. But so if you're top lane blue side and you end up dying, what ends up happening then? Well, in terms of pressure and what we're talking about, basically what ends up happening is now the enemy team basically has applied pressure throughout the whole top of the jungle, and including your top lane. Now this rolls down to mid lane as well. Basically, if you're top lane on blue side, you end up dying, that means that the enemy jungler in that top lane can go invade your blue, provided it's up and they have it warded and that sort of thing. But this also applies pressure in mid lane, because now if blue's being taken, that means that blue and your mid lane is going to be set back a little bit. That golden experience is going to be going to the enemy team, which is never a good thing. And that just puts the other top laner ahead. But that top laner for purple side can now come and gank middle, which means that if you coordinate a gank with your top lane after you just killed blue side top, then you can effectively make a 3v1 gank in mid. So that puts a lot of downward pressure there as well. Now, if you're red side, or purple side, sorry, and you end up dying, the enemy blue top champion can now go into double golems and take that from the jungler and go get red. So you're missing out on a buff depending on what side you're on, whether it be blue or purple, and you're now applying more pressure mid lane, which is not a good thing for either side depending on where the pressure is being applied. But overall, top lane has a pretty big impact on the game, being that it is a farm lane and that sort of thing, but along with the setbacks, now you have more pressure being put in other places, and people kind of don't really think about that all too much. It's like, oh well, top's gone, I'm fine, I can just keep farming, you know, I can overextend and do these things, and that's really going to get you probably in a bad situation. So now if we come down to mid lane and we look at mid lane, now mid lane is probably one of the most important, I would think, just in my opinion, only because the mid lane has the opportunity to impact either top or bottom. Because what you can do is, if you're mid lane, you can go up top and gank with the jungler and making it a 3v1 or a 3v2 if the enemy jungler's there, or go bottom lane and just have an extra body there as well. So having your mid go down is very important. Now, as you can see in the video here, my mid lane went down and I'm pulled from the jungle to cover mid a little bit. Now, that in itself, especially against any team really, because most teams now have a jungler, that's a lot of pressure that's being applied. Basically, what ends up happening is you're pulling your jungler from the jungle or from being able to gank for another lane to go cover that lane. So when top dies here, if the jungler ends up coming up, if a Mumu comes up and starts going there, then mid lane and bottom know that the jungler's not going to be there, and they can start applying pressure in that way. But getting back to mid, if your mid goes down blue side, I mean, that kind of makes it a lot harder to control your own jungle, and it's never a good thing, because now the mid lane can go, the enemy mid lane that is, can go and gank either top or bottom. So this is where wards come into play, and they're very important, only because that's going to help you slow down or relieve some of the pressure that's being applied. So now if we go down to bottom lane, and the thing that bottom and mid, sorry, have in common is dragon. So if your bottom lane goes down or your mid lane goes down, it makes it easier for the enemy team to do dragon, because now you have a lane down, you have that one man up, you have more presence on the map, and it just helps you secure that objective. Same with mid and top lane as well for Baron. So bottom lane, if you end up going down bottom lane and the enemy team gets a double kill on you, or even just one of them, that sets them up again for dragon very well. But what that does allow is a lot more pressure for every other lane now. If your bot lane goes down, that means that your bot lane can now push to that turret, they can get that turret, and they can go mid and help a gank for mid. Now, that's just basically dying or anything like that in your lane. Now, that's just one form of pressure. There's also variations of that as well, where you're losing turrets. If you lose top turret, that just means that now your top lane is a lot less safe to extend farther into that lane, and your buff, your blue buff or your red buff, depending on the lane, is a lot easier to be taken by the enemy team. So you always got to think about and look at what's going on in the map. If you see a jungler top because you just killed their top lane, then you know you can apply pressure mid and bottom without being counter ganked or anything like that. This goes for pretty much every lane, and they're all independent of themselves as well. But towers is another important thing. If you start pushing towers and you get towers down, whether it be top, it be mid lane, bottom, it doesn't really matter where, but that sets you up to apply more pressure in other lanes. And we see this a lot in a lot of pro games as well, and just at one of the last major tournaments, if anybody has ever watched this, but CLG pulled out the strat against Legion, I believe it was, where they had a very hard push comp. They pushed lane and did a lot of damage to the towers. Basically what they ended up doing, and this has been a strat for a little while, but this was a really good execution of it, is they pushed bottom lane and they got bottom turret very, very quickly. And what that allowed them to do was transition to mid lane and to get the middle turret very quickly. And then they got the top turret very quickly. And then they just went back again and did the cycle. So they effectively started pushing and applying pressure in each separate lane, but pushing forward very slowly. Once they got the first 3 towers, they got the second tier, and then they pushed them into their base. And then at that point in time, you have so much global gold for your team, because you now have objective control with Baron and Dragon. You now are up towers, which is a lot of gold, and you're able to control the enemy jungle as well as your jungle, so you're securing those red buffs and the blue buffs as well. So that's it's very good to know when and where to apply that pressure and how it's going to affect your team as well. Because if you can play to that, and if you know, okay, well my top lane's down, I can push my lane really quickly, I can go top and kind of defend that and slow that push or stop that push, then that's going to help you. The more you can slow the enemy down and taking your towers and pushing you back, the better you're going to be. And on the other side, the more you can push the tower and get them down, the better you're going to be in the long run as well. Especially if you have a lane that's not doing so well. If your top lane is behind in CS or behind in items in any way or anything like that, and you start taking some objectives around the map like dragon, mid turret, bottom turret, stuff like that, it's going to help your team, but it's also going to help that person who's behind, or could be more than one, but it just feeds gold into the team, which is always a good thing. That just allows for more items to be bought, which allows you a greater advantage. That way in team fights and everything else, it allows you to buy a lot more wards, oracles, and that sort of thing to keep that map vision up, to keep that pressure and all that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of a very general topic and something that I just wanted to go over really quickly, but at least touch on each lane and kind of what happens that way. It's just something to keep in mind, that if there's pressure being applied, depending whether it is, counter pushing or putting pressure in another area, like if top's being pushed in, you can go push bottom very easily and stuff like that. It's just really good. This comes down to map awareness and map control as well, and the more you do this, the better it's going to end up getting. Now, this does require a lot of communication and teamwork and that sort of thing, but it's something that you should probably always just keep on the back of your mind. Just always thinking about, okay, well, this is probably going to be pushed next. This is going to be, taken. This objective is going to be done. This tower should go down or has to go down so we can, more easily get this objective, that sort of thing. And just thinking in a little bit more broad sense than just your lane. That's just going to make you a better overall player, and it's definitely going to help you win more games and progressively get better. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I'm going to be putting out a lot more content as well in the coming weeks. Hopefully, if Law Recorder ends up getting fixed and I stop getting bug splat issues, because that's been pretty much the bane of half of the Law Recorders that I actually have, the games that I have recorded. For whatever reason, it just plays a bit of the video or doesn't even load at all. So I apologize for the gameplay actually not being as relevant, being that it's not showcasing exactly what I wanted, but at least you can listen to my voice and hopefully you understand and think about this and apply this in your games. Alright guys, well, thank you for watching. Consider liking and subscribing if you want to see more, and if you like this content. Please leave a comment, let me know what you think, and any suggestions for anything that you want me to talk about, or champion guides or something like that that you want me to go over. And thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.